my friends, welcome to Origins. My name's Don Chapman. It's such a privilege to have you with us today. I'm your host, and you know, Origins is a forum where we take the evidence of science and we use it to validate the truth of creation. And today we have a great guest with us. I've really come to become very fond of this man, both as a scientist and as a friend. Dr. Danny Faulkner is here with us. Good to have you with us, Danny.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
How wonderful to have you with us. Today we're going to talk about design in astronomy. So connect those two dots for me.
Okay, really, you know, there are two explanations of how we came to be, the world around us and us both. Either it happened through evolution, which I define very broadly as a purely physical, purely natural process. And some biologists might object and say, well, that's not what biological evolution is. But you see, evolution is not just in biology and geology, it's also in astronomy, cosmically, society, history, law, everything people do has been affected by evolutionary thinking.
Right.
And so I want to broadly define creation to be a supernatural process. Now that's pretty broad. Now I want to make very sure everybody understands what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about some pantheistic sort of thing or even some other God. I'm talking about the God of the Bible,
right.
Yahweh. But I want to define those very broadly. You have, again, a purely natural process or a supernatural process. And the two are really incompatible. There's no need for evolution if you believe in creation. That changes your worldview. You may ask, well, why is it important? Really what it does is it affects the way we look at the world.
Oh, it really does.
An evolutionist looks out and he sees chance, and he sees gradual processes, he sees struggle, he sees chaos, just probabilistic things happening. But a creationist looks out at the world and he sees design, he sees purpose in things. And so as a working hypothesis, we might expect in any aspect of the world around us, things would either appear designed or they will appear non-designed. And so that's what we all talk about, this design implication we find in any science, including astronomy.
If there's a God and I see his purpose and his design in things, then the implication is there's purpose and design for me.
Yeah.
My life now has structure, meaning, and purpose. If everything out there is by chance and I'm just an accident, then there's no purpose to my life.
That's right.
And I think that's a horrible way to live.
So the worldview of atheism and theism are very different from one another. It really has great ramifications. And I'm really concerned about Christians who ought to be having a theistic worldview,
right,
rather than atheistic worldview.
But we get contaminated by our culture, don't we?
Yeah, we sure do.
A lot of Christians aren't forming their worldview from knowing God. They're forming it from living in a culture that doesn't believe in God.
Yeah. Let me give you a little illustration,
okay,
of some of the things you might notice about worldview.
Share with us, please.
I'm going to show a couple of photos here. Here's one. This is the famous Horsehead Nebula. It's called that because, as you can see, a little, well, I'll circle it for you so you can see it better. Let's try blue. That doesn't work so good. Let's try green. That's better. Yeah. Kind of a horsehead shape.
Right.
Kind of a silhouette. And what we have here is a large region of hydrogen gas up here. And down here, there's a big cloud of dust, little tiny microscopic particles. And you have bright stars in amongst this gas that's causing it to glow. That bright red color tells me that. That's from the emission of hydrogen gas. The ultraviolet radiation from the stars ionizes the gas and the electrons recombine to give off that light. And then down here you have this big bank of dust that blocks off the light of more distant stars. You can see more stars here than you can down here. That's because we're blocking the view, blocking our view. Yeah. And a little appendage comes up right there to mark the Horsehead Nebula. It doesn't really look like a horsehead in 3 dimensions, probably, but in 2 dimensions it's nice. These two stars right here are surrounded by a big bluish cloud. That's because they're real close to the dust, but in front of it. And the light's reflecting off. We call that a reflection nebula. And we've all learned this really in 20th century astronomy and now 21st century astronomy. Here's another photograph. This is of a comet. Down here there's a little nucleus a few miles across, made out of ice and dust for the most part. And the sun's radiation and heat evaporates a lot of the dust and gas, and then it blows the dust and gas away to form the two tails, the gas tail and the dust tail. And the sun is down off the lower left. And we have a good understanding of what's going on in this kind of system all the way around. So the comets are beautiful. but we have a good understanding of what's going on physically amongst all those things. Then here we have the famous Ring Nebula. That's a very famous picture. Many people have seen it before. We have the ring showing up there nicely, and it's really more like a soap bubble, a big shell of gas. And only on the edges of the shell does the gas pile up enough that you can see it. And the gas is heated by frictional impact of gases running into one another. Oh. We believe that this thing was blown off by that star right at the very center. In the past, it blew off the outer layers. Not in a big explosion, more like winds that blew off. And this is the type of thing we call a planetary nebula. Bad name, it has nothing to do with planets, but we call them that. And they're all very beautiful objects. They're just lovely things. And we have a very good understanding of what's going on in each one of these things. Now, I showed you these three photographs very quickly to illustrate something. I asked the question, what did you see? Well, we saw a number of interesting physical processes. Subliming gas, dust being blown away, hydrogen emission, ionization of gas, all sorts of neat things. And all that's true. It's a lot we can learn about the world around us. I think that's part of the commission that we were given in the garden to explore the world, to have dominion over it. I think science is part of that dominion. But there's more to it than that. We also can see the Creator's handiwork. Yeah. And I think of all those astronomers out there who are seeing these neat physical processes but fail to see God's handiwork. And they see some of the physical processes, but they fail to get the most important point. Yes. It's showing God's handiwork and showing His existence. Yeah. And that's really sad, because you're missing the whole point then, aren't you? That's why God made it. The whole purpose is lost on people like that, and that's really sad. To the Christian, it's particularly sad when they fail to see those sorts of things. Now, I am concerned because design really is not a conclusive argument, because I found it's not really a head problem, it's a heart problem. If a person doesn't believe in design, then they're not going to see it. They're going to refuse to see that design, even though it's as plain as can be before them. And if you already see it, then just going to confirm what you already believe or already know. So you're going to likely ignore the evidence. So let me share with you a couple of aspects where I think design becomes very important. This is a photograph of a total solar eclipse. Doesn't happen very often. The moon passes in front of the sun and blocks out what we call the photosphere of the sun, the bright part of the sun. And for just a brief few moments, maximum of 7 minutes, usually it's shorter than that, you can look at the sun very safely, very beautifully. I read once many years ago that for any given location on the Earth, a total solar eclipse happens once every 4 centuries. Wow. So if you're going to actually see one, you're going to have to travel there some distance to see the thing. And this is a professionally done photograph. We have here the solar corona, this big thing outside the sun there, that glowing sort of thing. That's the corona, the crown around the sun. And it takes a camera, normal film camera, a couple of seconds exposure to show that. And down near the edge of the sun, there are these little things called prominences, which we can't see here because they're overexposed. If you take a very short exposure, you see the prominences looking like this, these big blood red loops showing up on the edge of the sun there. And they look that color to the naked eye. During a total solar eclipse, you can see these things. Very pretty. The neat thing is no camera does justice to this. Again, a short exposure or long exposure shows you certain aspects, but the eye sees it all. When you're seeing that, and you were telling me that it's not safe to look at it right before and right after the eclipse, but when the eclipse is on, if it's a total eclipse, only for those few seconds you can safely look at it. Okay. Now, you know, back in 1979, in February of '79, my wife and I went to see a total solar eclipse. We lived in South Carolina then. We drove 3,500 miles in round trip in 5 days for 2 minutes and I think 47 seconds. Where did you go? Manitoba. Okay. Actually about 100 miles north of Winnipeg. Wow. Or I call it Winterpeg. Yeah. Because it's really cold in February. Reasons. That's right. The snow was about that deep.